you guys are ready for some hardcore superhero action, because in this week's episode of My Hero Academia, the superheroes and students of UA High School throw down with Hero Killer Stain, and nearly every single second of it is damn near perfect. The punches have tons of impact. The kicks crack all of the ribs. The frickin' ice freezes everything down to the soul, and the fire burns bright like the fires of hell. This episode was metal. So what's the story in this week's episode of My Hero Academia? Very simple, really. Tenya is able to get back on his feet, and he joins Shoto Todoroki and Izuku Midoriya, the hero of the show, to fight against Hero Killer Stain. And they actually end up victorious, at least seemingly at first. And while all of this is going on, you have Gran Torino and Endeavor who are fighting against the giant Nomu monsters. And these scenes are just as awesome as the ones with Hero Killer Stain. Both stories combine at the very end of the episode, where Hero Killer Stain has seemingly been defeated and captured, when suddenly he is able to escape and out of nowhere kills one of the Nomus that's about to kidnap Izuku Midoriya. It's a very strange scene, but it speaks to the very strong and psychotic conviction of everything that is Hero Killer Stain, as he literally just stops right there. He becomes unconscious when suddenly a rib actually pokes directly through one of his lungs, causing him to just stop and stare at everybody with one of the creepiest faces that I've ever seen. And the reason I say face is because we actually get to see what he looks like underneath that weird raggedy-ass Ninja Turtle mask. He basically looks like freaking Lord Voldemort, a zombie, some sort of weird skeleton man, and he looks scary as fuck. The best way to discuss this week's episode is to talk about all of the individual character moments, because everybody had one, so let's just go ahead and start from the beginning. First and foremost, Tenya Iida. Man, this character was the star of this week's episode. Not only did he stand up for his brother, but he managed to fight back in a way that we've never actually seen in the series, taking up the mantle of his brother's superhero name in such a great fashion. I also loved that he was able to work in conjunction with Shoto Todoroki by utilizing his ice abilities to cool down his quirk, which allowed him to get right up in Hero Killer Stain's face and just kick the fuck out of his side. This was made even better because Izuku Midoriya finally got back on his feet as well and used his abilities to end up punching him at the same exact time. And there's a great scene where they both make contact with Hero Killer Stain, and it is just triumphant, to say the freaking least. It's so well done. And what's great is it just keeps on going, because right after that, they all end up falling out of the sky and having this little quick mid-air battle with Hero Killer Stain coming back to, trying to slash against Iida, who manages to just use this momentum to kick him again directly in the air, allowing Shoto Todoroki to blast him with his flamethrower abilities. It is satisfying as hell, and considering how intense this battle has been, it just feels right that they finally decided to beat this guy. And still, even with everything they had, with Hero Killer Stain actually just going through the psychotic rage, not even focusing on the fight that much, they still barely got him. All the scenes with Iida in this episode just really were fantastic. I especially love the little flashback they had with a younger version of Iida hanging out with his brother, who's explaining why he is a hero. A lot of it having to do with the fact that there was a lot of expectation for him to become a hero due to his grandfather and his father actually doing the same thing. But he doesn't really have much of a reason for doing it outside of the fact that he just wants to be a really helpful guy. He actually equates it to someone who helps out a lost child if they're like in a weird store or something. It's very strange, and Tenya Iida's fascination with that is also equally strange, but also incredibly heartwarming and enduring. I especially love the fact that even as a child, he moved like a robot. That's just something that's very funny about his character. However, when he does want to get serious, it always manages to hit it home. Not to mention, he's just a stand-up guy, really just caring about his friends and basically apologizing for the fact that they were able to get involved in this battle and that it actually led to them actually getting injured. If anything, this episode just solidified the fact that Tenya Iida is without a doubt one of my favorite characters from the series. He's funny, but he's also incredibly heroic and badass all at the same time. fantastic character. Can't wait to see more growth from him in the future. Izuku Midoriya, or Deku himself, was also very awesome in this episode, although he was much more of an accompaniment to both Shoto Todoroki and Tenya Iida in this battle. That's not to say he didn't deliver any epic moments, and that scene with him at the very end of the episode was also shocking as hell when that Nomu came down and actually picked him up and started flying away with him, and then suddenly Hero Killer Stain just breaks free of his bondage, jumps up and attacks this thing and takes it out in one shot. It's a really shocking moment, and I think most of the viewers are going to have the same reaction as a lot of the characters during that scene. It was pretty damn crazy. And Shoto Todoroki is just still continuing to be a great character, mostly because of his quirk, which is just so flashy and over the top and a lot of fun, and it's great to finally see him using more of his fire powers. That's something that they've built up so much all the way up to the end of the last arc of the series, and to finally see him using it in such great ways is fantastic, especially that scene where Tenya kicks him and he ends up just blasting him from underneath. That was satisfying as hell, and it looked really good while it was doing it. That is definitely something that is worth mentioning. Now, the other parts of the episode are just as cool. We get to spend some more time with Gran Torino and Endeavor, and most of that time is spent with Endeavor, and this is something that I've been waiting to see, because this is the #2 hero. This guy is someone that you do not want to mess with, and they proved why in this episode. He's basically All Might with fire powers, and that's pretty awesome. He's not as strong as All Might, but like there's this great scene where he ends up fighting against that one giant Nomu, the one that has like the brain that's encompassing almost all of its head down to the lower jaw, and he punches it and sends that thing flying like and skidding across the ground like something you would see in Dragon Ball Z. The guy's powers revolve around fire, but he's also super strong and also super confident in his abilities. And it's easy to see why, because, you know, they could have just gone the Human Torch route with Endeavor, basically just make him turn into fire, make him Fire Fist Ace, and he can just fly around and do his thing. I like that he utilizes his powers in a number of different ways. I like that when he runs across the walls, he actually melts it so that his feet get stuck to them. Little details like that, or like when he saves that one citizen who's being taken away by that flying Nomu, and he skids across the ground and you can see like all of the asphalt has been completely burned up. Like the freaking DeLorean just went back in time, except that it's not a DeLorean this time. It's a giant, ridiculous, muscle-armed man who's covered in fire. Endeavor is fucking awesome. However, he's not too concerned with meeting up with his son quite yet, because he sends Gran Torino to actually end up helping them out. And Gran Torino was no slouch in this episode either. There was a scene where he took out that one Nomu, the real skinny one, in such a ridiculous fashion, because first, Endeavor tries to just burn it with his powers, but then he discovers that it has multiple quirks and it ends up jumping up in the air, getting ready to attack them, and it starts spitting all of this weird pink goo, like all of its guts out in the middle of air, which is weird as shit, and then Gran Torino just uses his jet abilities to like fly right through that, come back down, and kick him back into the frickin' pavement, cracking it, and it's just so damn great. It still surprises me, however, that Endeavor has no idea who Gran Torino is, so we can just sort of imply from the scene that while he is an incredibly powerful superhero who's worked with some of the best, he's not exactly the most famous. Oh, and going back again, there's a scene that I forgot to mention, one that I just thought was really awesome. Like, right before Tenya goes on the assault, there's that fantastic scene where Stain is throwing knives at him, and one of them just gets stuck in his arm, and then he ends up getting planted on the ground. And then when his legs are being frozen, I love that he rips the knife out with his teeth. That was like one of the coolest Tenya moments ever! The episode ends with an extra shocking scene of seeing that Hero Killer Stain has actually survived his battle and escapes by attacking this weird flying Nomu, which tries to take Izuku Midoriya away. He ends up just taking this thing out in like one single shot with his sword, which of course pisses off Tomura Shigaraki, and then he turns around to face his opponents, his mask falls off, he looks creepy as fuck, and then he just suddenly stops. Right there. Loses all consciousness, and it's terrifying as hell. I like the fact that Izuku Midoriya still mentions his conviction by saying he still managed to stand up and fight against his opponents, even though it was essentially going to be a losing battle at that point. But still, it was kind of hard to tell, considering that when his mask came off, he became something else entirely. There was this dark red aura that completely encapsulated all of him, and it freaked everyone the hell out, as it did me as well. It was a really shocking moment, and I was really ready for someone to just jump in and save the day, but it didn't happen, and it was an end to what I'm thinking is definitely one of the coolest, most hardcore arcs from this series. So, what's the rundown? on this week's episode of My Hero Academia. I cannot praise this episode enough. It was super well paced, it had some of the best action from the entire series, and I love that we got a lot of characters working together and getting involved with one another. Tenya Iida coming back to fight with Shoto and Izuku Midoriya. Everything just sort of came full circle in that scene for me. All of the bad beef that they had with Shoto in the past means nothing now. They all work together so well that it's just such a joy to watch. Tenya Iida in this episode was also just fantastic. I love that that little talk that Shoto gave him in the last episode pumped him up because, man, he definitely delivered in this episode. His attacks and his kicks in this episode were just some of the coolest things I've seen from the series, especially that one attack where he kicks him in midair and then Shoto just lights him on fire. Endeavor was also really great in this episode. There was also use of some music that I don't believe I've ever heard in the series at all when he was going through the city, saving citizens, and fighting against monsters. And I don't know why, but it gave me this, like, Attack on Titan vibe, just the style of music that they decided to choose. It didn't turn me off entirely, and I actually thought it actually enhanced it, and maybe we'll get to see more like that in the future. I really liked Endeavor in this episode, despite the fact that he is still something of a douchebag, but he's becoming a very likable douchebag with how fun he is to actually watch. Gran Torino was also just so sick in this episode. Like, every character was awesome, and that's what was so good about this episode. It allowed everyone to do something great. Even Native, the useless hero, actually is a pretty cool guy, you know? He's very thankful of these students who came to help him, and he regrets that there was nothing that he was able to do, although according to Deku, Hero Killer Stain is the type of opponent you need a lot of people to use to fight against him. Otherwise, he's just going to take you out in one swipe. So, man, what a great episode. Done with such gusto and fantastic production value, and it was a great conclusion to what is probably the most tense arc of the entire series, and I have to say that it definitely paid off, especially in the action department. So I'm going to give this episode right here a 5 out of 5. I loved this one. I can't wait to see what they're going to do with the rest of Season 2 of My Hero Academia, and it makes me only anticipate Season 3 all the more, especially if they're able to keep up this quality. So check it out, guys. If any of you did watch this episode of My Hero Academia, make sure to tell me what you thought about it in the comments section below. And make sure to tell me about your favorite scenes from this episode and your favorite character moment and what you hope to see from the rest of the season. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more things My Hero Academia related, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button. Give this video a like. I'd really appreciate it. I'll see you all next time, and as always, Plus Ultra!